Good morning, sir. I am Danica Esposado and my partner Zian Palmas will discuss about Gothic architecture. Good morning, sir. I am Danica Esposado and my partner Zian Palmas will discuss about Gothic architecture. So let us define the word Gothic. What comes into your mind when you hear the word Gothic? Is it something punkish or black? That's right, because the word Gothic deals with dark elements. So now I'm gonna discuss about the history of Gothic architecture. Gothic architecture evolved from Romanesque architecture and succeeded by Renaissance architecture. Originating from France during 12th century to 16th century. At first, it was called as Opus Franciganum or French work. It was Gregorio Vasari who coined the term Gothic as a ridicule to describe late or medieval and architecture. It was also dedicated to the Goths as an insult for destroying the buildings in France. Abbot Suger was the first architect to develop Gothic architecture. One of his works is the Basilica of Saint Denis. It was the first ever Gothic church built. It is a place of pilgrimage and a burial place of French kings from 10th to 18th century. However, queens were commonly crowned there. Gothic architecture is the most familiar architecture of great cathedrals, abbeys, and churches in Europe. For example, the Palais des Papes, or the Papal Place. It was once a fortress and a castle, but in 14th century it was used for papal conclaves. It is one of the most important and largest medieval Gothic buildings in Europe. Another example is the Chartres Cathedral. It was called as the high point of French Gothic art and a masterpiece of Gothic architecture because most of the characteristics of Gothic architecture can be seen in that place. Gothic architecture is also the architecture of castles, palaces, universities, and the less prominent extent like dorms and rooms, like for example the Hunyad Castle and the Oklahoma University. So now I'm gonna discuss about the characteristics of Gothic architecture. The pointed arc. It is the main characteristic of Gothic architecture. It is also used for support, more weight, and effectively distributes the force of heavier ceilings and bulkier designs. Like for example, Notre Dame Church in Italy. The flying buttress. The flying buttress is defining external characteristic of Gothic architecture. These buttresses effectively spread the weight of the new designs, taking the weight off the walls and transferring force directly to the ground. Like for example, the Notre Dame in Italy. The rib vault. The rib vault is used to spread the force and weight from upper floors. The arc also provided the impression of bright and magnificence, giving the vaulted ceiling a feeling of grandeur and elegance. Like for example, the Marburg Castle in Poland. Another characteristic of Gothic architecture is the grand tall designs. One of the fundamental characteristics of Gothic architecture was its height. This all meant that Gothic buildings could quite literally scale new heights. It allowed them to reach to the heavens, perfect for cathedrals and churches. Example is the York Minster Cathedral in France. Next is the light and airy interior. Before Gothic architecture castles, the early medieval buildings were pretty depressing to live in. It is because the buildings were tended to be dark and dingy, and the windows were generally tiny. Gothic architecture strove to be the exact antithesis to this older medieval style of building. It emphasizes the light, bright windows, and airy interior, transforming castles and churches into more pleasant and majestic environment, like for example, the Cologne Cathedral in Italy. Gargoyles. One of the most notable characteristics of Gothic architecture is the gargoyle. Gargoyles are decorative, monstrous little creatures perched along the roofs and battlements of Gothic buildings and castles. It is used to scare hearts of ill-educated medieval peasants exaggerated evil features. It is used to seek safetiness inside the church or cathedral to protect from demons and ghouls, like for example, the Cologne Cathedral in Italy. Lastly, the emphasis upon the decorative style and ornate. It is used to honor the saints and to remind us the religious function and importance of the church. Gothic architecture marked the first time that beauty and aesthetic values had been incorporated into building design, like for example in Cologne Cathedral.
Good morning, sir. I'm Christian Zian Palmas reporting about importance of Gothic architecture. First importance of Gothic architecture is religious importance. Gothic cathedral honored by gods, building soaring vault ceilings as high into heavens as contemporary architecture allowed. Gothic cathedral literally centralized communities as they required entire villages of laborers and years to complete. The cathedral became not only the place of worship but also meeting place for peasants and farmers for whom the church provided spiritual and charitable services in everyday life. Many Catholic cathedrals had a floor plan in shape of a cross, which was not only structurally sound but also a reminder of Christ's crucifixion. Larger windows were decorated with detailed stained glass plates depicting biblical scenes and stories of the saints, like this picture at the left side of the slide. The key aspects of widespread growth of Gothic architecture during the Middle Ages was a belief that beauty was a spiritual path to God. Pope Benedict XVI said that the Gothic cathedral intended to express in its architectural lines the soul longing for God. But certainly, validation of church's power was a nice byproduct. The union of beauty with power, money, and religion was gave rise to some most sprawling and detailed structures ever built. Second importance of Gothic architecture is the architectural importance. The principal structural characteristics of Gothic architecture arose out of medieval masons' effort to solve the problems associated with supporting heavy masonry ceiling vaults over wide spans. The problem was very heavy stonework of traditional art, barrel vault, and groin vault exerted a tremendous downward and outward pressure that tended to push the walls upon which the vault rested outward, thus collapsing them. A building's vertical supporting walls that had to be made extremely thick and heavy in order to contain the barrel vault's outward thrust, like this picture on my left. Gothic architecture was used primarily to decorate the exterior of cathedrals and other religious buildings, and the earliest Gothic architecture used to decorate doorways or portals of cathedrals in France and elsewhere, like this Notre Dame.